There's controversy over another suspected US coalition airstrike in Syria that this time is feared to have killed 26 civilians, including children. The unconfirmed reports come from a monitoring group. The US says it's investigating the claims. It said the air raid targeted the village of Al-Khan in northwestern Syria, but it's understood that Islamic State controls are on the outskirts of that settlement, which, if correct, would therefore mean the rockets missed their militant target with devastating consequences. The incident's getting reported widely. It's also feared that the number of fatalities could rise further too. The response thus far from US Central Command is that it's looking at the credibility of the allegations.
We take all such allegations seriously and conduct credibility assessments of all information we receive regarding civilian casualties. If the information is deemed credible, we will investigate and publicly release the results of the investigation.
Reports of civilian Syrian victims in the anti-ISIL military campaign are adding then to the pressure on the US-led coalition. Just yesterday, Damascus accused it of hitting its army camp and killing 3 soldiers. That alleged strike was a separate mission carried out in the Deir ez-Zor province in eastern Syria. Damascus wrote to the UN Security Council condemning it as an act of aggression and calling for measures to prevent such incidents in the future. The US dismisses the allegations as I speak. Now let's go live to Damascus. Political commentator Ala Ibrahim's there. Ala, let's start off with the claims first of all of these civilian deaths today. The US says it's looking at the credibility of the claims. We understand it's been almost 24 hours since this alleged airstrike happened. Why do you think there's been no further statement thus far from the coalition? Could this have been a bombing mission on ISIS on the outskirts of that settlement, that village, gone terribly wrong, do you think?
Well, the circumstantial evidence certainly suggests that this is a coalition air raid, as the coalition, the US-led coalition, have been engaged actively in airstrikes in that area against ISIL, and that area is an area where what we know as the Democratic Forces of Syria, an umbrella group of Kurdish fighters, along with fighters from the FSA, are fighting ISIL in that area under the sponsorship and the direct support from the US-led coalition, and with the help of US airstrikes in that area. So circumstantial evidence do substantiate that theory that this is an airstrike gone wrong terribly. The numbers of casualties, according to local sources, are very likely to be larger than 27. We have a source in a hospital in Al-Malikiya in the Kurdish-controlled area suggesting that the number is 30 dead, 17 wounded, and the number is likely to rise as there are many people who would not be taken to hospitals in fear of being arrested either by the Kurdish or by the Syrian government.
Again, this is early days. The investigations are still continuing. It could have been a mistake, yeah, if it is proved that the US-led coalition did this, or it could have been intel gone wrong. Our previous guest, also from Damascus, said that he believed there was an ongoing problem here with intelligence issues, and that if the Western-led coalition acted closely with the Syrian side of it, things would be much easier to pinpoint. Do you agree with that or not, or is it kind of wishful thinking?
Well, in theory, yes, this is true. It would be much easier if the Americans would coordinate their efforts with the Syrians, and the Syrians are now coordinating their efforts with the Russians, and all of the countries in the world would be living in a happy environment where they all coordinate against ISIL. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Each party has political agendas in Syria, and it will only coordinate according to these political agendas. And as a result, I think it's highly unlikely that the Americans would agree to coordinate with the Syrian government. In this particular case, I think we need to be very accurate and say that in that area, the Syrian government, this area is outside the control of the Syrian government, and the Kurdish militias operating in that area, the YPG or the People's Protection Units, they usually have very good intel on the ground, and perhaps it's even this good intel could not provided the US with enough information to carry out an accurate airstrike, and the airstrike ended up going wrong in a very big way. But at this point, I think it's
What's Syrian reaction going to be to this news on the ground that maybe civilians have been killed in this ongoing battle against ISIL there, and killed by the Western alliance?
Well, this is not the first time that the US-led coalition has caused casualties in areas controlled by ISIL, but in previous occasions the casualties were in lower number, which made them easier for the media to ignore or not to cover. also adding the fact that it's impossible to get to ISIL territories and operate from there as journalists and consequently report any civilian casualties. But the fact remains that the Syrian government will try to use this incident to further prove its point that the US should coordinate with it in order to achieve a more active approach towards eliminating ISIL from Syria and Iraq.
Then there was that report yesterday at the Deir ez-Zor province that 3 soldiers had died again,
Yes.
and that maybe up to 12 civilians have been injured. Damascus wrote in the strongest possible terms to the UN about that. Has there been a suitable response yet, do we know?
No, there hasn't been any suitable response, and many here in Damascus believe that what happened yesterday, the attack on the Special Forces camp near Deir ez-Zor, that destroyed, not only killed the 4 soldiers according to local sources, and wounded a large number, like maybe some reports suggest 12 wounded soldiers, in addition to destroying 2 tanks, 2 armored vehicles, and 3 weapons caches in that area. But many here in Damascus believe that this is a message not to the Syrian government, it is to the Russian government, to say that despite the deployment of the S-400 aerial defense systems in Syria, the US still gets its way in Syria and can bombard anyone it wants, including Russia's closest ally on the ground, the Syrian army.
Ala, thanks for the update there. Political commentator, Damascus-based Ala Ibrahim. We appreciate it.